You're listening to a Benstown and McVeigh Media Podcast Network production. Run It Again is an inside look at the players, the coaches, and the business of sports with former NFL star and broadcaster Ron Pitts.
And 2 minutes later, I was back in the same Oklahoma drill that I got the concussion from.
And the mastermind behind the greatest show on turf, Coach Mike Martz.
And we want to force him into a vanilla defense and go to work.
Run It Again is a hard-hitting, no BS podcast that connects you directly to the source. This is Run It Again.
All right, folks, we're joined by a very special guest here on the Run It Again podcast, Randy Cross. That's right, the former San Francisco 49er, Pro Bowler, three-time Pro Bowler, 12 years with the 49ers, and most importantly, a former UCLA Bruin. That's right, we got one here. Hey, Randy, listen, man, my life is pretty good. You know, I get to sit here and talk football every week with Mike Martz on this show, and our producer, Roy Hamilton. He's also another UCLA grad. So all I have to do is just kind of, watch the ship drive itself, I guess.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, it's great to be with a couple of ex-Bruin greats and coach. Yeah, I think it's fantastic. So you're a lucky man, Ron. You can just sort of talk about ball and turn to Coach Martz and go, and
that's right. That you know how this business works, right, Randy? That's exactly what I do. Well, first of all, man, get us up to speed. I know for a bunch of years you were doing the commentating, and you started off with CBS, did some work there with NBC, but you're still doing some stuff with college football, right? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I started with CBS Sports in '89, right after I retired. And then when they lost football and Fox started, that's why I went to NBC. And then after NBC got out of Sunday afternoon football, I went back to CBS. So in total, I was doing NFL games for about 20 years. And then the last 10 or 12, I've been doing college football. Mainly, I do Navy home games. I do some American. I do Mountain West, a little Conference USA, but it's all for CBS Sports Network. And I'm joining you from New York right now, and every Tuesday night we have Inside College Football. So I'm staying plenty busy, and I guess after 31, 32 years, I just count myself as blessed that I'm still employed.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you look great. After being offense all those years, guys get so banged up, but you just look terrific.
Sure do, man.
I'm dying to ask you a couple questions. First of all, Randy, if you don't mind, what was it like playing for Bob McKittrick?
Greatest privilege of my football career, or one of them.
Yeah.
I was really lucky, Coach. I had three amazing linemen. Two were D linemen, and one was an offensive line coach. But in my career, Steve Butler was my head coach at Crespi High School in Encino, and he was a D tackle on the '66 Rose Bowl team that beat Michigan State. And his running buddy next to him was Terry Donahue. Oh yeah, and Terry was my offensive line coach for 10 years. I mean, for 4 years at UCLA, and then Bob McKittrick I had for 10 years. At San Francisco. It was amazing. I unfortunately, Coach, I don't think he'll ever get sort of the credit he's due.
That's why I asked because
because so many defensive players and coaches hated his guts.
Yes, he
sure did.
Well, he had a couple of techniques in there that he upset about. Yeah.
Well,
he was so good at it. I mean,
in his defense, Coach, and he never had us do anything that was illegal.
Right. No question.
He might have had us use a few techniques and do things that were in that gray area, but the league took care of that and said, you can't do that anymore. So as soon as they made it illegal, we never did it again.
Right.
But we were raised, it was a different time. It wasn't a time of kumbaya and brotherhood. And, I was in it for my team to win. And it wasn't about your health. It was about Joe's health and Roger's health and Jerry's health.
Yeah.
And everybody else on my team that touched the ball. And if I had to make a decision between the two, I hope you heal quick.
That's that old school talk.
Yeah,
it is, man. That's it. That's it.
You know, coaching again, watching you guys on tape, and it was so unique. It was such a special offensive line, and he was creative in what he did, and it was very difficult to stop. I mean, he's so well schooled in all the little details. And you just don't see that anymore. Not as much as, with like what you guys were doing. It's more of that zone stuff today, but
yeah, we were pulling and running, Coach.
Yes,
They had us on the run a lot.
Yeah. And that's awesome. That's what I believe. That's what I've always believed in terms of the running game and whatnot. And it was fun to watch them. And, I went to the very first practice that Bill Walsh coached up there at the 49ers. I was at that practice. And I was telling the guys a little bit of a story. After practice, he made us all wear 49 shirts so he knew who was on the field, right? But he had a little room. He called it the Chardonnay Lounge. After practice, he went in there and he sat down with any visiting coaches. Well, I was the only one there. And I'm like 28 years old from Fresno State. And I go in and I sit down, and he goes in, he gets a little glass of wine. He comes down. I talked to him for an hour. It was just incredible. And Randy, he told me exactly what was going to happen over the next 3 years, how many games they'd win. It's exactly what happened. And he said that, Steve DeBerg played for us at San Jose State in 1970. Yeah. I knew Steve, and he was going through a contract deal, and he was going to be the starter. He said, but there's this guy that we picked up in the third round. I know he's not a real big guy, but I think this guy's really special. Joe Montana, and everything just happened. It blew my mind years later because I got to know him when I was at St. Louis, because he and Dick Vermeil were good friends. So he was around quite a bit. And I told him, I said, you just hit the nail on the head. It was amazing. It was amazing to watch him walk around practice and get after coaches too about what they were teaching. He would correct everybody, coaches, players. I mean, he was down to the nth degree on everything.
Yeah, the great thing about him, and I appreciate it as a player, and I'm sure the coaches didn't necessarily appreciate it, but at least they got used to it. He, generally speaking, would rip a coach.
No question.
Well before he'd say anything to a player. Mm-hmm. Which I always took as sort of a guilt thing. He wanted me to feel bad about getting Bob chewed out. And he wanted Bob to be sure to know that his guys weren't doing what they wanted them to do. But, Coach, you'd be a perfect guy to talk to about this. Were you ever around a guy or saw a guy that had so many kind of plans to pay it forward more than Bill? I think that's one of the things that people talk about, his offensive genius and all that. But, man, they miss so much about the way he ran the team and the way he looked after, whether it was the minority coaching program or just coaches in general. He was always having guys in and wanting to share.
That's why I shared with you about that, Randy, because here I am. I'm 28 years old. I'm a coordinator over at Fresno State. I come in, I watch practice. I'm in awe of everything that's going on. And I remember him from when he was with the Chargers. And I go in and I sit down and I get a beer, and he comes down and sits next to me. There's nobody in there. We talk for an hour. I mean, what head coach in the NFL does that? Nobody does that, right? And I felt like I was his best friend when we left. He just had that way about him. He's an amazing guy. And then years later, when I was at the Rams, he used to come by quite a bit, and we'd sit down and visit. But he was if people knew how generous and engaging he was a special man for sure.
Yeah, I was also lucky enough to have Dick Vermeil as my head coach in college for 2 years. So
right.
He and Carol. I think my mom, up until the day she died, every Christmas still got a Christmas card from Dick and Carol Vermeil, and she always used to talk about that. She goes, I still get these cards from your coaches. I said, don't worry about it. Appreciate it. There aren't many of them out there that do that.
I've always said about Dick is if you played for or coached with Dick just for 1 year or for 20 years, you're always going to feel like he's your best friend or your dad or whatever. He just has that way about him. And I still, from his winery, I get 2 mailings a year with his wine from his winery every year. A case of wine. Hey, I got this. You wait to see this Chardonnay. It's really good this year. And he's just an amazing man, of course.
Yeah, hey, Randy, you're bringing up some memories here. So I get to UCLA, Mike, in '81, and they're telling the stories about the guys, the old guys that were there. And it's the 76 Rose Bowl team, okay, because they hadn't been to a Rose Bowl in quite a while. And they're throwing names out there. Like, the first one, of course, if you're a defensive player, is Kenny Easley. Everything had to be done like in Kenny Easley. It was compared to Kenny Easley, Jerry Robinson, Freeman, the running back, Freeman McNeil, the running back.
Freeman McNeil.
Yeah. I mean, all these great players, and Randy Cross. I see Randy's picture up over here, but it was the 76 Rose Bowl team. That's what we had to hang our hat on. That's what our goal was.
That's the standard was. Yeah.
That's the standard. Okay, guys, we haven't been back this thing in a while. Let's get it done. And some of the old players, they were old to me, Randy, but they might be guys that you would remember. Guys like Mark Ferguson. I don't know if he was there when you were there. Irv Eatman, some of the older Cormac Carney. These are some guys that would tell us these stories. So
those guys were kind of behind me. Jerry Robinson actually was a wide receiver my senior year, his freshman year.
Was he?
And TD and then moved him to linebacker the next year, and all he was a 3-time consensus All-American at linebacker.
Right.
So wide receiver, not so much. Linebacker, pretty good.
Oh gosh, yeah. And there were a couple offensive line. Was it Mark Tuinei? Was he with your class?
No, he was after.
Little after. Okay, Mark Tuinei. I think he went to the Cowboys. We had some guys there, but one coach in particular I want to ask you about, because even as a defensive player, he had an impact on my career and how I thought about football, and that's Homer Smith.
Yep.
Homer Smith was an amazing mind offensively to me, and he had that military background. Share some Homer Smith stories with us if you can.
Yeah, he was like you said, he was very special, and we were running the wishbone when he was there.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And that was very, very interesting, to put it lightly. We were one of the best in the country. I mean, my sophomore year, we ran for about 600 yards on Stanford. And we're watching the film the next day, and Homer, James McAllister, one of our running backs, he and Kermit Johnson were our two stars. And, James had to go out at the half, and he had like 120 yards rushing at the half. And Homer flips off the light, and he says, "Did you see that last play?" And he gets down on his knees, and he says, "Right here, see the corner of this tile? That's our target point for our fullback. James, you were over here." And he moves his hands about 6 inches.
Yeah,
and he goes, "You were here. That's unacceptable. Long term, we can't win doing that." And he would do that all the time to different positions and quarterbacks, and the different drills he had the quarterbacks doing on ball pitches and everything else. But what a great man. And I had the privilege, later on, my son, who was also played quarterback, he played quarterback at Wake Forest, and then he was a graduate student and played a year for Mora at UCLA at wide receiver. And he was in camps all the time as a quarterback, and that just started. And Homer's grandson was one of the kids at a local camp we used to have. And Homer showed up one time, and it was just like old school. He was just starting it all over again, because he was like Bill, in that he'd talk about the snap and how do you get away from the center and how your feet move, and the exact first step has to be this far at this angle so you can cross over this far for this angle. I mean, it was fun to watch, and it really reminded me of Bill Walsh when I saw it again years later, because Bill used to do those things with our quarterbacks every single day, and he always needed somebody to snap. So I volunteered because I didn't want to run all those pulling drills. So I said, I'll go over there and snap. But I'd be there snapping, and you'd listen to him on the drop, 3-step drop, 5-step drop, 7-step drops, any wasted steps, any wasted motions. And he'd be killing Joe, especially because he'd always go, "You're an athlete. That's your problem. You think you can get away with it, don't you?"
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh man, Homer was. He would come up to me and say, he'd always call me by my number. All right. He said, "Hey, 47, you look pretty good out there." And I said, "Thanks, coach." He said, "But we know how to beat your ass." And I said, what's that about? Coach? He said,
in your head.
Yeah. And he said, "And if you want to know how, come by my office. I'll show you how we're going to do it."
Oh,
but what he was telling me is he was saying, "Hey, listen, we got the book on you." He would say that, "We got the book on you, and come by the office. I'll show you the book."
You got to clean it up.
Right. And, he was telling you, okay, this is how football is. This is how people will game plan for you. This is how the game works. And there wasn't a guy on the team that didn't love Homer, regardless of what position you played. I mean, that's just how it was. So,
Randy, let me ask you I'm dying to ask you a question about today's football and offensive line play. What kind of difference, if there is a difference in your mind about what's going on today as opposed to when you played?
Well, I'd say the first obvious thing is everything, or 99.9% of what happens today happens standing up.
Yeah.
And parts of it resemble kind of sumo wrestling more than anything else. But I think the offenses that to me are fun to watch are the ones that take advantage of the amazing athletes we have now in the offensive line positions, and that get them out and get them moving. That to me to watch, there's nothing like watching a dude that's 6'5", 340 or 6'8", 325. I kind of like the old days of Jonathan Ogden at Baltimore, and sort of forward. Through every 5 to 10 years, they go through a period where nobody pulls and people try to do it. And right now we're watching guys that can really get out and go. And I like that with the offensive line. But, I think the zone scheme has adapted well inside and outside to a lot of what, they want to do, especially staying off the ground and working the way they do. I mean, it's like a big bear ballet half the time.
Yeah.
When they're running the ball.
Randy, 3 Super Bowl wins back there at San Francisco. I know you get asked this question a lot. What was it? What made you guys special? This and that. But when you look back to those times, what's the first memory that pops back into your head?
Well, probably beating Dallas in January of '82.
That NFC Championship game? Is that,
the catch and all that. Yeah. And one of the sloppiest, if you like good, clean, artistic football, someday, YouTube it, watch it, or get a tape and watch that game. Man, there were fumbles and interceptions and penalties. It was just sloppy as hell.
Interesting.
And everybody remembers it for the last, our last possession for the touchdown, and Dallas's almost possession where Drew Pearson just gets short collared at the last second by Eric Wright. And so their comeback doesn't happen. But it'd be that game because San Francisco had been almost for so long that's all we heard about going into that game from the media was, they almost won against Detroit in the late 50s, and they almost won at Candlestick a couple times against Dallas and almost got to the championship. But just being able to do that. And the other thing I remember about those teams, and only because I was on them, were our defenses. Man, our defenses were when in Super Bowl 19, which is the best team I ever played on, everyone wanted to talk about it was Marino versus Joe. And we going in, I kind of laughed because we never got asked about it. But man, our defensive line, Fred
Dwayne
Dean,
Board,
Gary Big Hands Johnson, Louis Kelcher,
Big Louis Kelcher,
Manu Tuyas, Sosopo. I mean, it just goes on. Larry Pillars, just goes on and on.
Was Board there then? Dwayne Board, was he there? Dwayne Board.
Yeah, he was starting at the other DN from Fred. Yeah, and
that's a big defense.
But Coach, we never got asked about that. They'd always talk about Marino and or even through the years, everyone, and it's natural. They talk about Joe and they talk about Jerry and Roger and Dwight, all the great weapons we had. But man, to me, it was our D. Because from that first time we played Dallas in '81, when Bill traded for Fred Dean with the Chargers and basically stole him from San Diego. And Fred had like 3 or 4 sacks in his first game as a Niner defensive end. From that sort of period on, our defense, say what you will about our offense, I just remember our defense as they were torturous because they would hit people so hard back when you really could. We had defensive players that would take people's souls during games.
and Randy, you had a rookie secondary, didn't you?
Yeah, 3 out of the 4.
3 out of the 4. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that was big.
And the other guy was Dwight Hicks, and he'd been working in some pharmacy. They got him off the streets and put him to work.
Who was the defensive coordinator? I can't remember the defensive coordinator then.
First one,
the first Super Bowl.
I want to say it's Chuck Studley.
Studley.
Studley. Then it went on. Then it went on to George. And
Seifert?
We had then we had some other ones. George was later, but we had 2 or 3 coordinators through that '81 to '88 period. Kind of like our offensive coordinators. We had a few of those too.
Yeah, sure did. Hey, Randy, what do you like? What do you like and dislike about the college game?
I dislike the professionalization of the college game. I think the whole NIL thing is a Pandora's box that
I agree 100%.
I know it's modern. I know it's today. And I know I just think they will live to regret this. I don't like that, but man, and the last couple of weeks are the best example. You get done with a Thursday through Saturday spate of college games before the NFL ever starts. And it's like, this is the best game in the world. There's nothing better than football. Yeah. And college football, for all the enthusiasm and the fans are different. The fans, and not that they're more crazy or whatnot, but I mean, you're raised to be a fan of a certain college team. That is from the time you were born. That's from the crib to the grave. And it's a little different in the pros. You might change teams because you move and you go do different things. But man, college football, you can live in Anchorage or you could live in Key West. But if you're born in Texas or you're born, an SC fan, or you're born a UW fan up in Seattle, you're going to be with that team till the day you die.
That's right. That's right. Well, Mike, you got anything else? Man, we could stay here all day.
No, that was fun to listen to.
Yeah.
The college thing, it's I think that's just dead on, especially the professionalism. That's a good term for what's going on in college football. But I think it's so much more exciting to watch college football than it was years ago when they're in the I formation and put you to sleep and win 10-7. Now you don't know anybody can score anytime, and everybody's got a quarterback, it seems. So it is a lot more fun to watch college today than it was maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, Coach, you were one of the first ones in the NFL that did it as far as spreading people out and using the whole field. And how many years did the NFL look down their nose at college offenses? And it wasn't until maybe 8-10 years ago that finally the NFL went, we spend millions of dollars drafting these guys. Maybe we should let them do what they do in college. They've been doing since the 7th grade.
Right.
And do that with our team, and then sort of slowly but surely work into this other stuff we want them to do, but let them do what they've always done. And boy, has it paid dividends for the Mahomes and other guys that have just tortured NFL defenses.
It's funny, when I was first at the Rams and when they were in LA, before we moved back, Chuck Knox was the head coach. We were playing Kansas City and Joe was a quarterback, and we ended up beating them in this game. But we were on first down, and at that time, that particular year, I was calling the offense for him. I wasn't a coordinator, but he says, you call the play. So I was on first down. We had Jerome Bettis, who was in 4 wide receivers. They'd split everybody out. We'd run a belly to Jerome, and he'd roll in there for about 10, and he got on the phone, which he never did. He got on the phone. He said, Mike, I don't ever want to see 4 receivers again in the game at the same time. I said, okay, coach. He said, I want to see tight ends and fullbacks. Okay, coach.
Yeah,
That's the way it was.
yeah.
It was totally
man.
unacceptable. You could not be anything but 2 backs and 2 wide receivers and tight end.
Yeah.
My first and second down was almost illegal.
It's the greatest thing to me that the NFL's done over the last decade or so. It sort of opened up their minds and let the college game come up, let it percolate up,
Yeah.
and let those kids be themselves.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how many years, Mike, have we seen over the last 20, 30 years, great college quarterbacks that you never even, if they came out of the wrong system or got drafted by the wrong team, they might as well have dropped into a parallel universe. So you had a better chance of seeing them again. I mean, it's been crazy.
Steve Young goes to Tampa and has the worst passer rating in all the NFL, and he goes to San Francisco. Just so where your background and everybody throws the ball in college football. And so for, like you said, for so many years, you didn't know what you're getting when you drafted a kid because you never really threw the ball much. You just look good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's different now.
Yeah,
it's good for
Randy.
it,
Who was a quarterback when you got drafted there?
At San Francisco?
Yeah.
This guy that I believe is a Hall of Fame worthy guy that had spent 5 years, I believe, at New England, getting the dog doo-doo beat out of him because Chuck Fairbanks thought you could run the option in the NFL. Guy by the name of Jim Plunkett.
Jim Plunkett was there when you got there.
For 2 years. I mean, I'm a rookie, and we've got like me and 4 old guys. And they'd played some in the league, but we weren't very good offensive line, and we contributed to Jim's list of surgeries. And we were one of the reasons Al Davis had to rest him for about a year after he picked him up in like 78 after the Niners cut him. And Al Davis just said, look, you just sit here and rest. And Jim just rested. And all he did was, go on and win them a couple of Super Bowls. So.
Yeah.
Did you say Hall of Fame worthy? Is he not in the Hall of Fame?
No, he is not. No. I think more people have looked, especially with Tom Flores being in, and they just don't know. They don't know the football story that Jim's background has, besides his college and, he won the Heisman and all that. That his adventure through the NFL, you talk about Steve, Steve was at Tampa, then he had to watch at San Francisco.
Yeah.
I mean, Jim got abused physically for the first X number of years before he got to the Raiders. And then when he got to the Raiders with Cliff Branch, that offensive line, because he had Uppy and Shell and Dalby. And I mean, they were just, it wasn't fair, some of the stuff they did.
Raymond Chester. Yeah, he had some guys. Yeah. Then they went and won it. They beat New England. He
had Ghost for a little bit. Yeah, they beat Philly. Then they beat Washington. We should. Yeah, then they beat Washington, and it was a wild time.
He's got to be in. What I know you get asked this one a lot too. What made Joe Montana different? What separated him?
I think early on was his mobility. He was just different from a pro quarterback. Because people forget Super Bowl 19. He set the Super Bowl rushing record for a quarterback. He ran for about 80 yards in that game. That people just choose to forget about. He was one of the first. He and Tarkenton were guys that ran to pass, not ran to run. And he was the most competitive person I think I've ever been around. We had a preseason game in New Orleans. He and DeBerg. I don't know if you remember the old. It was a football game. It was a video game, and it had rollers. And you had to roll the ball, and you had to roll the receivers, and you had to do this. So you sat there and you pound and pound and pound. He and DeBerg both had their right hand, their throwing hand, were big lumps of purple the next day because they did it for hours, and neither one of them would stop. And they got ice bags on their hand, and the coaches, Bill's going, I've got to play one of you, but which one of you has the best hand right now?
That's funny.
He would never, and he talked, and you'll appreciate this, Coach. Joe Montana talked a lot of smack across the line
Mm-hmm.
all the time, which
Interesting.
as an offensive lineman would
Yeah.
tend to aggravate you a little bit
Yeah.
because you didn't figure those guys need much motivation.
Yeah. Right.
You know, Randy White would hit him, and
Yeah.
Joe would look up and he'd look at him and go, "Randy, I didn't even know you were out here. Good to see you." You know, it's like John Ayersby looking at it, goes, just grab him by the face mask and go, "Don't do that."
Yeah,
But-
right. Get him riled up. Oh, that's funny. That's funny,
awesome.
man.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome, Randy.
Well, Randy, we appreciate your time, man. We know you got to get on that prep train. We know all about
Yeah.
that. So, but we
My pleasure.
appreciate having you, brother. And thank you very much. And good luck to you and the family. And enjoy. Hey, football, at least until January, right?
I love it. It's the best.
Yeah.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Randy.
guys.
All
We
right.
appreciate
All right
it.
now.
Randy Cross, boy, nothing like a good Bruin to start your day off, huh? Huh, Mike?
No, yeah. He was such a dynamic player. He was the original tough guy.
What was he? Yeah, because
Yeah, he
I don't
was.
remember him much
I
as a
remember him
player
playing.
because
I
I
do.
he was a few years ahead of me. Yeah,
He
yeah.
was a very physical, very athletic guy. Yeah, he was a pretty special player.
Now, what's interesting is that offense now, and he talked about Bob McKittrick, the
Yes.
offensive line coach.
Right.
That offense was the West Coast offense. And I remember our defensive linemen used to complain, as he alluded to, I think there, so much about
Yeah.
the cutting,
Yeah.
the chop blocking.
So we played against those offenses when I first came in the league and stuff. And McKittrick, they protect him. He's beloved to them, and rightfully
do.
so. He's a great football coach, but they would cut you. And since that time, the league has passed a rule which you can't by engage, cut a guy, and all that. But before that rule came about, they would do that. It was pretty violent stuff, and guys would get injured and whatnot. And it wasn't against the rules, so they did it. They stretched it, and since that, there have been several rules of what you can do inside that would prohibit that today. But they got away with some of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because, listen, the old school football, that they used to cut on kickoffs. You remember that? On special
Yeah.
teams plays,
Well,
guys would get their knees blown out.
Yeah. Tell me about it. In college, we could do the same thing. We could cut. I just remember, on kickoff, return and whatnot, doing those things. I went to cut this nose guard from San Diego State. He's coming down the field, and
Yeah.
he was probably about 5'10" or 11, and he probably tipped the Toledos at about 285. I'm about
The
210,
Toledos.
I went to cut him, and he put my head when I went to cut him. It was between my legs when I got up.
He buried it. Yeah.
Oh, he just
Yeah.
destroyed me. Crawled off to the sideline, and that kind of deal. But those days have changed. But anyway, McKittrick, the offensive line coach there, he was the original tough guy, ex-Marine, I believe.
Yeah.
But I remember back at like Green Bay, when it would be 10 or 15 degrees, he just wore a shirt.
Yeah, he was kind of that tough mold
Yes,
guy, like
yeah. He's a legend. I mean, he was unbelievable. They were so well schooled in everything they did. It was a major reason for their success, no question.
Yeah, he was like Bud Grant.
Yes.
Came from that school,
Yep.
wear a t-shirt if for nothing more to psych you out mentally, or to let his guys know, hey guys, look, this is what it is. We got to play. And
the other psych that Bud Grant used to do, Ron, was he made it known that after games he'd go duck hunting, like it was no big
remember that.
beach, and we just went duck.
I remember that. Yeah. Now we're talking for our listeners who don't know, we're talking about former Minnesota Viking head coach, legend Bud Grant.
Yes.
Spent a lot of years in the CFL, and they say that's where he got that cold man's aura about him. I don't know if that's true, but he definitely had. I remember the Rams going up there trying to beat the Vikings in the snow at that old Metropolitan Stadium, and they couldn't do it. No matter how well they played, it was something about that stadium, something about him. And another thing I remember is my father talking about how this guy, they got it down, because I guess their training camps weren't real long.
I went to the training camp. One of our ex-players when I was at Arizona State, or University Pacific linebacker, excuse me. I'd gone there when I was at Arizona State to watch them, and I thought it was a mistake. It was a walkthrough, but I guess it was their regular practice. I mean, it was a nothing practice. I thought to myself, this can't be the NFL.
No, that's how they practice.
That's how they practice.
Yeah. So I remember my dad was pissed off. He's like, "What the hell? They can get it
They don't
done.
do
Hell,
it.
we got to be
How'd
able to
they
do
do
it.
that?
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah. How'd they do that?" Anyway, man. All right. So what was
Different
what was
day.
on my mind this week? Oh my gosh, there's a lot on my mind. A lot of stuff's gone on. We're going to get into the trades with the Rams pulled off and some other stuff, and Cam Newton back in Carolina. We'll get into that. So let's talk about the games from last week. I'm going to save the Monday night game.
Okay.
Rams 49ers. We're going to save that. Let's spend some time on that. But let's start. I'm going to throw one at you. Let's start with Tampa Bay and the Washington football team. Oh man, Tom Brady threw a couple picks in the first quarter. One of them I don't think was his fault, but they got some pressure inside, and that didn't help.
They did. Well, that's a good defensive line, though. Even after they lost
Chase Young,
they're just a really good defensive line. They're really good on defense, and people continue to underestimate Heineke. He's a good player. You know, I watch his demeanor and how he is between plays, and you know, his energy, and he's so accurate and quick with the ball and sure of things. There's no hesitation. He looks like a veteran, and you know, I think you can win with him. I really do. I think he's a real solid. And why people think you've got to change and get somebody else, I don't know. I'd love to have him as a quarterback.
Yeah, I like him. No, Mike, I like him. So you mentioned this last week. This robber coverage is starting to reemerge. It's not new. It's been in the league for a long time, but it's starting to reemerge. And robber coverage, for folks that don't know, basically involves a one high look in the secondary, man-to-man coverage, one safety deep over the top of everyone, protecting people deep. But they take the other safety and they drop him down in the middle of the field, and it is what the coverage says. He's looking to rob and steal something. And lurk
or robber, that's same.
Yeah, one lurk, right? Remember, we could call it one lurk. So what has caused this to reemerge again? And then why are quarterbacks having trouble with it?
How they're playing it is different. You know, in the past, Ron, when you'd see lurk coverage or robber coverage, they may or may not be pressed outside. But on the snap, the safeties would change on the snap. They're not doing that now. They're letting him hang back a little bit because the quarterback in the first three steps IDs the coverage, right? They're letting him hang back there and rob from his position and come down slowly and then accelerate down based on route reading. And it's what I guess it's hurt. They did to Tom Brady. But it's hurt some of the quarterbacks in the league, the more experienced quarterbacks. But it's interesting. You get burned like that too. I've always said this about those teams that show and try and move into something else. What we used to do to get them out of that stuff is we'd come out in a spread formation, go on the first sound, boom, and just go.
Yeah, now they can't move.
Now they can't. Now they're out of position. And, you know, we hit a couple touchdowns against the 49ers one year. They're trying to get back into cover 2 and show cover 3, and we hit Isaac down the sideline. But you know, that's one of the things that you can do. And I just don't see people come out and just go on first sound at all anymore. I think that's a very valuable tool that can be used.
Yeah. Well, turnovers again will always kill you, and it killed Tampa Bay. Time of possession went along with that. Washington had the ball 40 minutes in Tampa Bay 20 minutes, and that's the recipe to beat Tom Brady. Take the ball out of his hands.
Just don't let him play.
Yeah.
Just don't let him play.
Yeah. So, all right. So that one, the big loss for Washington was, of course, Chase Young, and that is a major loss. They're going to have to.
Yeah, that's for the season.
Get along with that.
But there's some other really dynamic players there. They're really a good defensive front, even without him. They're solid on defense, and as a quarterback comes along and they get better on offense, they just need to run the ball a little bit better than what they have been. If they can do that, then they're headed in the right direction with that organization.
Yeah, that's right. Carolina, Arizona. That one surprised me. I thought Arizona was in a good spot there, and Cam coming in back to Carolina, and but he pulled out some of that old Superman magic.
Well, he did. I don't know how much of the game he played. I know when they got down there, they put him in there. But I think what happened with Arizona is, based on the week before when Kyler wasn't there, you didn't know what they were going to do, and now they had the one game to study, and they just they shut him down pretty good, I think.
Yeah. That's, I don't want to say it's sad, but Walker started the game and he was 22 of 29, 167. He managed it pretty well. Cam, he only threw like 4 balls, but yet when you look at the highlights, all you see is Cam.
That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how well will he play as a full-time player in there? I don't think he'll play worth a darn.
Yeah.
I really don't. I think he's done. He
Yeah.
can't move anymore. He looks sluggish to me. He's going to get injured. He's at this point in his career. When you get heavy like that, you can't move. You don't have the foot speed, and he likes to hang on to the ball anyway. They'll have to rethink what they're doing on offense if he's going to be the starter. I'm not a big fan of what's happening there.
McCaffrey is back. That's going to help that team a lot. He had close to 100 yards rushing. What's happening with Arizona now? They started out hot, and it almost feels to me like they haven't recovered from that Green Bay loss.
Maybe defensively, I'm surprised that they weren't better on defense. But the quarterback is such the X factor of that whole football team.
Yeah.
Without him, it takes the air out of the ball completely.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray. So I think that's it. I do think that they're better defensively than what they played. But, you get to the midseason, every year I coached in the league, the hardest part of the year was always game 8 and 9 and 10 in there. It was really hard. Guys just got the fatigue factor set in, and teams that hadn't been playing well, all of a sudden they're playing better than what they did earlier. So it's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, that's right. Kyler Murray did not play that. Start that game. Didn't play.
No.
That's a big loss for Arizona. That's tough to get around without that. We'll talk about how that relates to the Rams later on here. But Arizona still on top in the division there. So we'll see how that plays out. So my wife and I were out of town this week, and we came back in the airport through Dallas. And of course, everybody in the airport has a Dallas Cowboy jersey on because the Cowboys beat the Atlanta Falcons. And I just had to ask this one fan that was all decked out in the Cowboy garb. I had to ask him. I said, "So how was the game? I mean, you guys got the win. You excited? You happy?" He looked at me and kind of shook his head and said, "We'll take the win, but that Atlanta team isn't very good, and we're still not sure how good we are." And I thought that was interesting.
Pretty accurate assessment, actually.
Yeah, right. That's exactly. I thought to myself, "Damn, dude, you ought to be on TV. Maybe we ought to have him on the podcast." I should have got his information, but
yeah,
I think he hit it right on the head.
The biggest difference with them, Ron, is it's a team. I know it sounds silly, but it's an organization that's learned to win again.
Yeah.
And and by that I mean to keep a level of performance the same or better every week. You know what I mean? And not have those days off, so to speak. So, and I think Mike has done a good job with that. And defensively, they're totally different. They play with enthusiasm. They're well schooled. The secondary has always been an Achilles heel. All of a sudden, that's become a real positive for them. So I think they're a Super Bowl team. And I said at the beginning of the year, and I believe that. I still think when the dust settles, Green Bay and Dallas will probably be in the NFC Championship game. I don't think the Rams will make it.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. Rams are in a weird place right now. Yeah. Watching that Atlanta game, I thought that Matt Ryan struggled, Mike, and for the first time, it really jumped out at me. It didn't look like his arm was right.
Well, he's at that point where it's going to diminish somewhat, but there's things that you do during the season too to keep your arm. We used to call it the rag arm, to keep from doing that. And you use those rubber devices that pitchers use in the league, to keep your arm from getting sore and go without, getting the rag arm.
So the bands, right. Yeah.
So they do a lot of band work, and I don't know how much he does, but Tom Brady and a lot of quarterbacks do that, so they don't get that arm fatigue. I don't know. I don't know if he was or not. I think Dallas is so talented, and that now that they're starting to do things differently on defense and move things around and be different than what you've seen last week on TV, I think that's a big factor for them too.
Yeah, and that was a big game for Dallas. They had to get off the schneid after last week against Denver.
Yeah, no
that
question.
whole debacle. So they ran the ball. They got that going early. They got the CeeDee Lamb going early. They got the energy in the building. Yes. And that's big in a place like that. See, that's another thing. Certain, if you watch games carefully, certain teams have to have a lot of energy early. Does energy help everyone? Yeah, of course it does. Got that. But I'm talking about it's essential for them to have it early. And if they don't get it, they seem to struggle the whole game. Rams are one of those teams. Cowboys are one of those teams. Raiders are one of those teams.
Well, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. I really do. I think they're really good teams that get behind the 8 ball in the first quarter to can't recover. There's a reason why they're not in the Super Bowl. The really good teams can do that, and there's a way around that. And there's a tenacity and a toughness that's inherent in those kinds of teams that fight through that. They just don't ever, there's a lot of football left to play in that game. I don't care if there's 5 minutes left in the game, you're done by 3 touchdowns, you're still going to win it. You have that mentality, and they're just, you can't have that kind of emotional up and down and be a championship team. You just can't.
You can't have it. Yep. Tennessee, New Orleans. That was an interesting game. I thought New Orleans was going to come back and win this one. And Tennessee, after the big win against the Rams in LA a week ago, you had to figure there's going to be a slower start, and they're playing a good team at home in the Saints. But in the end, that could have been anyone's game, and Tennessee pulls it out.
They did, and the good thing that came out of that game is that, on New Orleans' behalf, is I think they've settled down at quarterback a little bit now, and they kind of know what's going on. And Simeon, I think he played well enough to be a good starter and help them win. I don't know how good he really is, but he's bounced around a little bit. But the final analysis, there's been some really good players come out of the league like that, that have had a hard time settling in a spot to get an opportunity to do it. I think that's where he is right now. They're a really good team, and they've been protecting the passing game. By that, I mean, they have not really done the things and opened things up like they had in years past. Perhaps he might now.
Yeah. So Tennessee is on top of the AFC South. Got a 3-game lead there at 8-2 over Indianapolis, who I still like Indianapolis. I'm still looking at Carson Wentz. He's still going, still playing. That team, that team, Indianapolis, a year ago, Mike, remember how good they were? But they were like the best team that didn't advance in the playoffs. That's what I thought, at least in the AFC.
They got started so slow. They were so bad early.
Yeah. It's
been a hard year for them. They're trying to climb out of that hole that they dug early in the season. It's been a tough road for them on defense, I think. They won't be there in the end, but I think the best AFC teams probably are Buffalo, Tennessee. Who am I leaving out? I don't believe Kansas City's going to be there in the end.
Well, New England's moving, and you called this,
and I think
a week ago
will be the 3rd team. Yes.
Yeah, New England now all of a sudden is at 6-4.
Yeah.
To Buffalo 6-3.
So New England, remember in 2001 when we played them in the Super Bowl, this is what they did that year. They had a rookie quarterback that was finding his way, Tom Brady, and he was working things around a little bit. He didn't start off real good. He just didn't make mistakes. And when we played him in the Super Bowl, he only threw for like 150 yards, but he threw for 2 touchdowns and some of those things. And that's what they're doing. That's why he's who he is. That's why he's the best coach in football, perhaps the best one ever. Is he knows how to win. And that's his formula. And some guys go there not happy with it, then go someplace else, But his impact on Tom Brady can't be overstated either.
Yeah. And 6-4 now is the second best record, tied with some other teams in the entire AFC. Of course, Tennessee being up there on top at 8-2. So they've worked their way back there. And Mac Jones, like you called it, Mike, Mac Jones, you can see his maturation. You can see he's playing better and better. And I saw him kind of joking around, laughing with some of the players on the sideline. And a lot of people think he's a dead serious guy and not a fun guy and all that kind of stuff. I didn't get that feeling. I think this is a kid who's getting more and more comfortable there.
I think when you play in an organization, it's business.
Yeah.
It's purely business. And when you're out of it, then it's different. But when you're the quarterback in New England, it's business, and there's, the intensity of it, is different than probably most other places.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on. Well, Cleveland now, they played Cleveland, and a lot's going to fall on the shoulders of Baker Mayfield now. And literally, boy, he's got a bad shoulder, and now he tweaked his knee. And right about now, he's got to be wondering, wow, maybe we should just kind of get out of this season.
Well, I would suggest to that organization that you take Baker, have him have his surgery, let him recover, and get him ready for next year. I don't know. I think he is beat up so bad now. I don't know how much you can win with him. He's struggling.
Mike, I don't. Just looking at some highlights here. Poor guy. He's trying not to fall on the left shoulder.
Yeah.
But now he gets the other knee tweaked. So where does he fall next time, and how does he fall? And I think he's starting to think about other things.
He's going to play because that's who he is. If they let him play, he's going to play. That's just the way it is. But he can't play defense either. So they didn't stop him.
No. They've got other issues, and now they're sitting at the bottom of kind of a really average division. I think it turned into that with Baltimore on top of the AFC North at 6-3. Then there's Pittsburgh.
How did Miami beat Baltimore when Miami was on like an 0-5 streak or something like that? And how does that happen?
Yeah, I'll tell you how. Because Baltimore, and they do this at least 2 or 3 times a year, Baltimore decided that they were going to make Lamar Jackson a pocket passer. And I understand encouraging your quarterback to be a quarterback in this league. I get that. And they talked about how he's throwing better and all that. But he missed some things, okay, as he will do. And by the time they figured out he's got to run the ball a little bit more, they were out of the game. And then Tua came in, and everything just went smooth, and Miami clocked them out of it 22-10. They had some big plays.
And Tua, I think, coming off the bench like that after the injury, I think there's a lot of emotion involved there with the other players too. They probably played as good as they could play.
Yeah. The turnovers, of course, don't help. Baltimore had 2 turnovers. Miami didn't have any turnovers.
But Baltimore always has turnovers. They have a lot of turnovers, and they've made some real bad plays on special teams, which must be infuriating for that coach. Of course, that's his baby. So
11 penalties to 4. That's what Miami had, but won the game. Usually you don't get out of that type of situation. The Chargers, they drop one there to Minnesota. Chargers, they're in trouble. That's what it feels like.
They are in trouble. They just can't stop anybody with a decent running back. They just can't stop anybody. Yeah, they can't get on the field. The way you beat them is you just gobble up the clock. You run the football, get first downs, and you just don't let that quarterback on the field. And it's frustrating for them. And then they get impatient, start chucking it. But they just couldn't stop anybody.
Yeah. Green Bay, Seattle, they went back with Russell. Russell was there. I thought Russell struggled. I thought his line struggled. You could see them trying to bring all that energy and stuff that they usually have back in Seattle, but it just wasn't working there in Green Bay.
It's hard to get anything working in Green Bay when you go up there. I don't care who you are. But that's the first shutout Pete's ever had up in Green Bay. Yeah. I mean, up in Seattle.
Yeah.
They've never been shut out under his
right.
Tenure.
Yeah. 17 zip.
Yeah.
So it's funny now we're not hearing too much about Rodgers and COVID and vaccinations, and it's that winning's one hell of a vaccination.
Makes you go away.
Yeah. All right. So the Rams and San Francisco. So the Rams now have dropped 2 in a row. Ironically, they've dropped 2 in a row after making trades in back-to-back weeks for high-profile guys, which I'm not so sure that's always the best thing for a team. But moving forward, that's the 5th straight loss to the San Francisco 49ers. So all of a sudden, Mike, this is a team that everyone has enjoyed talking about is a Super Bowl team without a doubt. They're going to do what Tom Brady did. They're going to have the Super Bowl right here in their hometown, blah, 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 blah. Hold on. Pull back. Whoa, Nelly. Okay. let's revisit this thing, because right now they're sitting at 7-3, having lost to 2 divisional opponents that they're going to have to play again, and they're in trouble. They're in a little trouble right now.
Well, if I'm playing the Rams, if I'm a team that's playing the Rams at the rest of the season, one of those 6 or 7 teams or whatever it is, what I'm going to do for my study and preparation is just look at how the 49ers played in the last 5 games. I wouldn't look at anything else. And they have a plan that works, and it's very effective, because up front, all they want to do is rush a passer.
That's
the
it.
Run fits and all that sort of stuff they work on it, but they're going to rush the passer. And then they attack the rushers. They run right at them. Yeah. 99, they ran right at him. They didn't make any bones about that guard. He pile drive. They just ran right at him and just beat him up physically, made him play football.
Like it looked like a 9-on-7 drill, and a 9-on-7
It was exactly
drill.
what. It's exactly what it was.
Yeah, 9-on-7 drill, folks, is a drill where it's just the interior linemen, offensive linemen, and the 6 interior defensive people, and they just go at it. All the DBs, receivers, tight ends, they're out somewhere else. Tight ends will get in every now and then, but it's a tough guy drill. We find out who's who in that drill now.
Yeah, and that's what they did, and they had no answer for it. And the thing that was interesting to me is they ran that same little downhill pitch. It was like a pitch ISO to the left side.
Yeah,
and they trapped the guy with 2 guys on the outside. They must run it 6 times, and they never stopped it. Well, one time they did.
Yeah,
one time they stopped it, but there was no adjustment at all to try to help those guys. And I think they got frustrated with that, and I think they sat in that defensive front, and that coverage there on first and second down didn't change anything.
No, and this is a team, the Rams, that are used to being ahead by 10, ahead by 14, and now the other team is out of their game plan of running the ball, and it's pass. Now here comes Donald, here comes Floyd, Jalen Ramsey is back there going crazy.
Right.
And they want to play 7-on-7, and that's everybody. I mean, that's nothing new.
That's the league more.
That's the league.
That's the league. But the thing that's hurt them more in the last 2 losses is the quarterback. He's been awful. In this game on 3rd and 5, you throw the ball way back behind Cooper Kupp there, and he can't. He just missed. He just missed all night long. He missed everything.
Mike, he's missed all night long. And I hate to go there, but I'm gonna go there because it's the truth. I question whether or not he has taken off that Detroit Lion coat and put on a Rams coat. It feels like it's the same Stafford from the Lions out there playing right now.
All right, so here's an analogy. Mahomes at Kansas City in the last few weeks up until now was kind of just playing on his own, just trying to make something happen.
Up until this last Raider game.
Then this last week, they said, listen, buddy, the discipline of what you do is important. You stay with your read, the short throws, and they got back on track. I think his whole career has been kind of an ad lib situation, and he's a little bit like that in a real disciplined offense, which obviously is what the Rams are. But he, it's like I've felt this about him all along. Every single game, he's got 2 really bad plays.
Yeah, that's what it's
at Detroit. Every week he might pass for 500 yards, but he had 2 really knothead plays in there, and I don't watching him play. I can't figure out what's wrong with him. There's something about him I just don't like. And then it dawned on me when I was watching. He looks to me like he plays this game in a panic.
Yeah.
He's like he's going too fast almost, and he just doesn't have any, he just doesn't look like he's under control to me. He's a great competitor. He's got a great arm. He's got all those great things. I'm sure he's good in a lot of categories, but his whole demeanor when he plays bothers me somehow.
He was 26 of 41 because they got behind, so he had to throw a lot. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. One wasn't his fault. Another one was definitely. Garoppolo on the other side, they clearly managed the game for him, and he did a good job when he had to throw. I thought he was really on, but then again, he was up in the pitch count, so it was easier for him.
Yeah, but he, Ron, in defense of him, he made some throws there on the touchdown. I mean, he split 2 defenders.
No, he made. That's what I'm saying.
He threw BBs in there. He didn't. I mean, he played exceptionally well.
Yeah.
There's one play in that game that comes back that really bothers me. It's at the end of the game, fourth quarter. They're down their goal line about the 10, 15-yard line. It's 4th and goal. And they're down, 31-10 or whatever it is.
Who's this now? Who's got the ball?
The Rams have got the ball.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Oh, yeah.
4th down. The receiver comes across the back of the end zone. He throws it 10 or 15 feet above the guy's head.
I know.
What's that about?
I know.
He wasn't under pressure.
Yeah.
He just smoked it right over his head. Well, in my mind, when I've seen quarterbacks do that, until I coach quarterbacks in this league, because there's a different group now, veteran quarterbacks, when the game can't be won, they're concerned about their numbers.
Yeah.
That could have been a pick, and he was going to throw it away. It's a throwaway on 4th down. Who does that?
Well, Mike, I thought he also could have run for a touchdown on one of them. He started rolling out to his left, and it was a play that they called him for being over the line of scrimmage when he threw the ball.
Yeah.
I think it was a couple plays before that.
Yes.
And as he's rolling, I'm thinking, oh, well, hell, he's just going to run for the pylon, and he's in. And then he stopped and threw it. And I thought, wow, that was weird.
But Ron, in the first quarter, he threw a curl route that must have gone 20 feet over everybody's head.
Yeah. No, Mike.
And that's why when guys get play in a panic, they just real quick and they just jerk the ball onto the receiver, and he's just wired. He's just wired to, and he just can't control himself well enough. It's always bothered me about him.
Okay, so let's go to this. You bring in 2 high-profile guys, all right? One can't have many more miles left on his tires, and that's Von Miller. All right, if they get a couple rushes out of him a game and some pressures, great. The other guy has some time left on the tires, but he needs to manage himself and needs to be managed. Do you like bringing those 2 guys in, and do you think those 2 guys coming in had anything to do with the amount of drops I saw from the Rams receivers? It's almost like they've been hearing about Odell Beckham all week long, how great he is, how he's going to be a difference maker, blah, blah, blah. Robert Woods is out. So you've said to the other receivers, you guys are replaceable, marginal anyway. Forget what you've done the last 5 years in the Super Bowl and run and all that. This is what we really needed. I don't
think Kupp and Jefferson care less about Odell Beckham
and Higbee.
He's the 3rd or 4th guy. I don't see that.
It's just the talk, though. I'm saying.
Yeah, I think they're too good in the locker room with that football team, and I think anytime you can add people to that squad to help you win a Super Bowl, I think everybody's all in on that. I don't see it that way, Ron. I really don't.
Okay.
Maybe it's from I'm a coach and I don't know the doings in the locker room and whatnot. But if I'm one of those defensive linemen, I'm happy we got another pass rusher. If I'm a receiver or a quarterback, I'm happy we got another guy that can make plays for us. And I think that's important. It's about winning. Of course, it helps them all. Winning solves a lot of things, and it helps each guy. All of a sudden, everybody's writing a book, and they want more money on their contract when you win. You can't do that when you lose.
Nobody wants a loser's book.
It's good. Winning is good for everybody. I don't care how it happens. It's good for everybody, and I think I think they've embraced him. I don't see that as being an issue, but maybe it is.
Yeah. It was strange to me. I saw guys drop balls that I haven't seen ever drop balls.
But Ron, those drop balls would have been great catches.
I see. So it's the throw.
I want to see a ball in that game that he threw that hit the guy in stride.
That's a good point. Okay.
They're always under throws or they're high. There's nothing. Even the ball pitched into the flat at 5 yards when the Cooper Kupp. I mean, that ball was way back behind him. He had to be an acrobat to try and catch it. And then, of course, announcer says, well, there's a drop. Well, yeah, well, sort of, but it's legal to throw in front of him too, So I think the quarterback was absolutely horrendous in that game. And I think that affected everything.
Oh, man. And of course, it's Hollywood. So, it had to be some drama. Maybe this is all a part of the script and this is how they get it's better this way. It's like a movie, right, Mike? It's better if they go the hard route and then do it the heroic way in the end. Here's
my problem with the Rams. It's twofold. I think they underachieve on defense for the talent that they have. And I think a lot of that is the defensive coordinator is just very, very, very vanilla and benign.
Raheem Morris.
And I don't care how good you are. If you sit in a defense all the time, you're going to get lit up by a decent team. And I think offensively, the quarterback has got in big games, he disappears. He doesn't play. When things are at their worst, you got to beat your best at quarterback. That's not who he is. You know, he'll have a 500 yards or whatever and be an all-star in a game against Detroit or, you know, Jacksonville or somebody. But when you have to make plays in a tight contest like that, he's not making them for whatever reason. But he's been like that to me. I'm just not a big fan of him I think he's a solid starter in the league. I don't think he's the answer. And they thought he was the answer when they came in there. Maybe he's going to prove me wrong. I don't know. But
oh, no, Mike, you're on to something there. No,
I would hold my breath if I saw him in the Super Bowl. I would hold my breath.
When you say you hold your breath.
I know one of those balls is going to go 10 feet over the guy's head and hit the free safety in the chest, you know.
Oh, gosh.
It's just you don't know what's going to happen either. You know, if he's got clean feet and he can sit in and look at it and he'll throw a strike. But you know, when things are tense and you got to make something happen and you've been down, you've been beat up and you got to drag yourself out of a hole and win, he can't do that. The great ones do, but he can't do that. Yeah. I haven't seen him do it.
Yeah. And I'm just attributing that to, okay, you know, he had some success in college, but 12 years in Detroit, 4 winning seasons, 3 playoff appearances. He's taken a lot of shots.
Well, he has his defense. He has you can't be at the bottom of the barrel for 12 years and all of a sudden be at the top and know how to deal with it.
Oh, that's a great point. That's a huge point, Mike. Wow.
So he has to learn this, and maybe he can. But if I'm coaching him, I'm gonna look at this tape and I'm gonna try and calm him down, because his reaction to things is really quick, you know, and just focus and make good throws. You know, get control of yourself. He's not. He's just not in full control of himself. And there's a leadership problem there too, because all of a sudden, if the players think these last 2 games, he's clearly lost these last 2 games. He can lose that team real easy.
I didn't like the press conference when they were asking him about Odell. And I want you to go back and look at it, Mike, if you can pull it up from last week. And anyone, our listeners, please go back and listen to it. Because my gut reaction was he didn't want to talk about Odell. He didn't want to have another headache, another thing to worry about. Like, do I have to get this guy involved now? He just wanted to move on and talk about something else. Like, well, he's here. I don't know.
I think when you're with a football team that's a real good team that's in the hunt, and somebody like Odell Beckham comes in, you know, it's just not a big deal to him. In other words,
that's what it seemed like. Yeah,
it isn't. And it's up to Odell to blend in with them. It's not up to them to cater to Odell. And that's
right.
I think why he's agitated about that is these people think it's a big deal. It's really not a big deal. And Odell will find that out.
Yeah, right. If they do it right.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
No, but just living here in LA, I mean, you're in San Diego, but living here in LA, Mike, it's like Jim Brown just got 30 years back on his body and he just joined the Rams, 50 years back on his body. Just it's that kind of aura, you know. They're lumping it in like the Laker thing. Like, all right, we're building a super team. Yeah, it's easy. Let's just do it. Bam, we're going. It's like, whoa, folks, wait a minute. There's a lot of moving parts to this.
Well,
and Odell's got some things that he's got to clean up in his head.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about either one of those guys, or Odell, or I could care less. Here's what I'm concerned about is I see the defensive coordinator in the top corner of the league getting into an argument, almost having a fist fight on the sideline. I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, I saw that. Yep.
So Ramsey here, they're going back, and I know what he wants to do. He's not playing. They're not. In other words, you know, when he was really going good, they put him on their top receiver and they blitz and do things. And that's what these guys want to do. They want to get moved around a little bit and get creative on defense and create problems for people. But if I'm playing the Rams, I know I'm going to start my game plan today because I know exactly what we're going to see next week because they do it every week.
They do it every week.
I'm just telling you, it's not good. It's not good. When you have that kind of talent, you got to let them play a little bit. You got to give them some steak bones. You got to put that carrot out in front of them.
The defensive talent.
Yeah,
like
you got to
right.
put him in position
to
double A gap blitzes and have him have to get blocked by a tight end or something. They're not they don't put pressure on an offense at all. When an offense can stand in there and hit you in the mouth every snap, something's wrong. You don't do anything.
Boy.
My first deal would be, I'm going to bear defense. If you can run against that, then beat us.
Yeah,
make them throw the football.
Yeah. He tried to put some more defensive linemen in there, but it at that point, I think it was too late.
It wasn't really. Instead of having the stand-up backer, it was a guy with a hand on the ground. It's the same structure of defense. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And then to hear Brian Greasy say that, I thought, Brian, come on, man, you know more football than that. It hasn't changed anything.
No, they punched
stand him up or put him down. What difference does it make? It's the same structure.
Yeah. All right, Mike, that's it, man. We're out of time, out of time, and I got to get out of town. But I've used so much time.
You missed the game of the week, though, Ron. Detroit and Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
you missed the pillow fight up there in the north.
The pillow fight in the north. And then the officials had to get into it by calling the taunting on my man Cassius Marsh, which was BS, and then Tony Corrente bumps him. Well, that's some weird stuff. But
the tie 16-16 going into the end of the game ends, and everybody just kind of looked around and said, "Now what happens?"
yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, I'm talking about the week before there.
This past week
this past week the tie, right? Yeah, Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh is something else now.
It's like they wanted to end. We're going to end this game because we can't film this anymore. we don't want to show this anymore. Yeah.
You call the pillow fight up? Oh, geez.
It was a pillow fight. It was awful. I feel bad for Danny. They just don't have any. Danny Campbell, head coach of Detroit. They just. He's got nothing up there.
Well, we know this. Detroit will not go the 0-17. They can't do it, right? I don't think they can go into because they're 0-8-1, right?
Yeah, but that's not a win either, right? So they can still go win. Let's see.
They'll just have one less loss. That's what
it's not a half a win. This counts as a half a win, right? It doesn't. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to help your boy out.
What does it count as, right? You get to
I don't know. I'm just
when you got to the end of the game, everybody, all the coaches and the players, they just stood and they looked around and said, "Okay, now what happens?"
What's that handshake like?
Yeah, it's not good.
All right. Okay, I got to get out of here, man. Our producer Roy Hamilton is on us. We got to get out of here. All right, buddy. I will talk to you next week. All right. Bye.
Bye.